So we believe that an organization's culture is not this abstract idea. It's something that we can measure, and it's something that we can affect and change over time. And so we work to adapt a number of scales, surveys from other industries, places like aviation and healthcare, to be able to create what's called a safety culture survey for a child welfare or human services context. So we worked with colleagues at Vanderbilt, we adapted some scales, we've tested it, revalidated it, and since published a paper putting into the literature a safety culture survey that's appropriate for use in a child welfare context. So we've now used this safety culture survey with a really large number of child welfare jurisdictions across the country and a large number of child welfare professionals. And some of the early data from these surveys is starting to tell us some really important ideas. And so in our survey, we measure things like psychological safety. This is this idea that I feel as a professional that I'm accepted, I'm respected, I'm part of a team. I feel safe speaking up. Importantly, I can challenge my colleagues and be candid with them in a safe way. And on my team, we treat mistakes as opportunities to learn, not opportunities to punish. We also measure a teamwork approach called mindful organizing. This is an approach that teams use to work together, to innovate, to anticipate unexpected events, and in the face of those events, come back to normal operations. This is something that's been identified in places like wildland firefighting and in aviation, some of these other settings where teams are able to do this. We've adapted this scale, use it in child welfare, and again, it's sort of a scale of how teams work together in a safety critical context. In addition to psychological safety and mindful organizing, we measure safety climate, which is sort of your relationship with your supervisor and how that sets a safe context for the work you do. We measure workplace connectedness, which is about how you interact with your peers and how connected you feel, how much, frankly, you like one another and participate in the work in a way that's meaningful. We measure emotional exhaustion. We measure measures of turnover and intent to remain in the work. So all these sort of important factors that sort of describe, again, the behaviors, values, and beliefs of the professionals working in these child welfare settings that we're working with. And so we know that when we see teams that are more psychologically safe, they also are more connected to their colleagues, so higher levels of workplace connectedness, lower levels of emotional exhaustion. We also know that teams with higher levels of psychological safety are better at mindful organizing, this kind of teamwork approach, and they have lower levels of secondary trauma, which is really important in our setting, this setting of child welfare, where our professionals are frequently exposed to other people's traumatic materials. And then when we see teams that are really good at this thing called mindful organizing, they similarly have higher levels of workplace connectedness, lower levels of emotional exhaustion. And this measuring emotional exhaustion is really important when we're looking at how these scales relate to one another, as we know it's the strongest predictor of turnover among all the things that we measure.